over 1,000 pages about a man, Don Quixote, who goes mad from reading too many chivalric tales and decides to become a knight, convincing a farmer by the name of Sancho Panza to accompany him as his squire. In many ways, I see myself as a modern-day Don Quixote, so naturally, it is the text I chose from these projects. However, my paper actually looks very little at Don Quixote and his exploits. Instead, I focus on the text's outstanding framework and its paradoxes that create a blurred line between fiction and reality. These paradoxes ultimately are meant to increase reader participation within the story and resist the trend of the 17th century to provide clear moral instruction as a main function of literature. I explore these ideas in two main parts. The first part, contradictions from narrators and their unreliability, dissects the many narrators that present Don Quixote's adventures to us, particularly the ways in which they spark levels of uncertainty in the reader and force them to question the validity of the story they are reading. The second part, contradictions from reality within the unreal, is about what can best be explained as fourth wall breaks in the text, where Cervantes makes himself present within his own world. Something else quite notable in this section is that Cervantes addresses how, before he was able to publish his part two of Don Quixote in 1615, a fake one was written by Alonso Fernandez de Avellaneda in 1610. To preface my coming analysis is an essential breakdown of the narration in Don Quixote. The story is framed as one collected by various historians who assembled parts and passed them on to other historians to continue piecing together. Not only does Don Quixote contradict the concept of Cervantes being the author by including this scramble of historians, but it also puts the validity of the story into question as well. The entirety of the story passes through six voices: Cervantes the author, Cervantes the historian of the prologue, the anonymous narrator of the first 8 chapters, the Arab historian Cid Hamete Benengeli, the Moor who translated his work from Arabic into Castilian, and finally, a second anonymous narrator. Thus, to pass through so many hands creates questions about validity due to misinterpretation, kind of like a game of telephone. With each perspective the story passes through is yet another opportunity for an oversight, for something to be misunderstood, mistranslated, or missed entirely. And each narrator brings their own uncertainties into the limelight. The perspective that begins chapter 1 of Don Quixote sets up the text for a roller coaster of uncertainty. This narrator starts the story by saying, quote, "In a village in La Mancha, the name of which I cannot quite recall." The first thing to note is the use of the first person pronoun I, which implies a specific person is telling the story instead of some omniscient narrator. And yet, who is this I? It very well could be Cervantes, either the real one who wrote the book or the historian version of himself in the prologue. It could also be an anonymous narrator, which, in the spirit of Don Quixote being a history, brings up some serious issues about bias and credibility of the narrator. On the topic of the credibility of the narrator, this one immediately brings himself some doubt by not knowing the name of the village Don Quixote is from, a very important detail for a history. The narrator continues by talking about Don Quixote's real name. The text states, "His surname said to have been Quixada or Quesada. Concerning this detail, there is some discrepancy among the authors who have written on the subject, although a credible conjecture does suggest he might have been a plaintive of Quixania. But this doesn't matter much as far as our story is concerned, provided that the narrator doesn't stray 1 inch from the truth." Once again, the narrator is shown as unreliable for not even being able to place Don Quixote's real name. However, what is more important is the origin of Don Quixote's story, which is brought into question in this sentence. There are multiple authors who have written on the subject that all also disagree on Don Quixote's real name, making them all questionable regarding being reliable historians. The narrator claims that there is credible conjecture, though he does not cite the credibility at all. There's also the question of whether the first-person narrator is even present at all anymore. In the last line, there is a shift to third person, where the narration states, "The narrator doesn't stray 1 inch from the truth." Not only is this line a shift in the narration, but the content of the line seems to almost want to brainwash the audience. To make the audience disregard the blatant unreliability laid out before them corresponds well with how Cervantes might have viewed the concept of a moral message in a text. By having the narration tell the audience not to think too deeply about the glaring unreliability is essentially mocking the idea of a moral message. The fact that Cervantes fearlessly mocks other genres throughout the text solidifies the probability of this being the case. Overall, setting up the story in such a confusing way shows how essential it is to Cervantes for his readers to critically analyze what they read. Moving on to the second part of my analysis, the real within the unreal, I'll be analyzing the falling action of Don Quixote, which includes Cervantes' protagonist, meaning a character, Don Avaro Tarf, originating from the false part 2 of Don Quixote by Avellaneda. By the time Don Quixote and Sancho meet, and Cervantes chooses to spend one of them reiterating the importance of distinguishing his Don Quixote from Avellaneda's. Of all the encounters that occur over the course of the novel, it is quite noteworthy that he chooses this to be the last one before they return to Don Quixote's village. It was also one very dear to Don Quixote and Sancho, for during the time in the inn, they made Don Quixote speak to a mayor and notary who were coincidentally there, filling out a petition renouncing Avellaneda's Don Quixote and Sancho. The text states, "The deposition was drawn up with all the legal requisites, as is proper in such cases, which delighted Don Quixote and Sancho, as if such a deposition were vital to their welfare, and as if their deeds and their words did and clearly show the difference between the two Don Quixotes and between the two Sanchos." Perhaps this was an important encounter for Cervantes because it resolved the conflict of Don Quixote's history being told by others. As much as the mention of Avellaneda's fate part 2 allowed for funny scenes throughout the story, its constant appearances might allude to how much it bothers Cervantes. This is seen again during Don Quixote's death in the final chapter, which was directly followed by the priest and notary writing out his death certificate and, quote, requesting the certificate to deprive any author other than Cide Hamete Benengeli of the opportunity to bring him falsely back to life and write endless histories of his exploits. Before the audience even gets the chance to mourn Don Quixote's death, Cervantes inserts one last time that he, through Benengeli as he has done in the past, is the sole creator and author of Don Quixote's story. At times over the course of the novel, Cervantes has suggested to his audience prior to this that the primary focus of Don Quixote was to denounce books of chivalry by making a mockery of them. In the final line of the book, Cide Hamete Benengeli writes, quote, "My only desire has been to make men hate those false, absurd histories in books of chivalry, which, thanks to the exploits of my real Don Quixote, are even now tottering, and without any doubt will soon tumble to the ground. Farewell." To bring this all to an end, I shall tie it back to the beginning. Over the course of these two sections, I have identified contradictions in the narration of Don Quixote by way of a multitude of unreliable narrators and fourth wall breaks. We are forced time and time again as the audience to wonder, what if Don Quixote's story is real? And who can we trust to tell us this truth? In this final line, as quoted above, we can certainly interpret it as a commentary on chivalric tales, as is most clearly laid out. What stands out, however, is the addition of the word real in, quote, "the exploits of my real Don Quixote." This word could refer to many things. It could be another comparison to Avellaneda's fake Don Quixote and a final assertion that the book we have just finished is indeed the real one. It could be an implication that, despite all the unreliable narration and paradoxes we have endured, all that we have read is true to Don Quixote's tale. It could also be an allusion to the possibility that none of this was fiction, and that much like how reality made its way into a supposedly fictional world, Don Quixote has made its way into ours. Ultimately, my goal is not to decide which of these is true. The fact that there are so many possibilities for interpretation of a single line at the end of the book reveals just how ambiguous Cervantes intended the message to be. Therefore, through intentionally creating a confusing framework, Cervantes causes the reader to become an active participant who must decide for themselves what his story means to them. To bring this back to my thesis paper as a whole, I also incorporate the ideas of Clint Brooks's The Heresy of Paraphrase, Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Its Technological Reproducibility, as well as some broad ideas about novel theory. Moving forward, I will be adding a section where I tie the ideas of my first two sections back to the content of the story itself by investigating Don Quixote the character. In the end, while I think becoming an expert on this novel is quite frankly impossible within the parameters of this project, I felt blessed to be given the opportunity to further explore the work that has been such an inspiration to me and literature as a whole. Thank you all for your time.
So now we have some time for questions for our panelists.
I have a question for Charlie. And I know that we talked about usefulness in the narrative and debating how useful of a framework it is to talk about how useful things are. And you also mentioned some other theories that you're going to be approaching, such as like feminism and things like that. And I was wondering, like, if that usefulness narrative ties into feminism at all, and like how that's approached in your paper.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say they are tangentially related within the paper, because the specific theory that I'm using does touch a little bit on the roles of women and how, especially their role in the workplace, and how there's also a section of my paper that is dedicated specifically to analyzing the community aspect of the novel, wherein I go really hard in on all of the kind of sexist and ageist interactions my narrator has with the people in her community, where they kind of reduce her to just this womanly figure over and over again who is only useful for the fact that she can nurture and be caring and be the master, the chief mourner of the ceremonies and things like that that only women do. So they are sort of related, but that specific scene that I analyzed in my speech does not necessarily apply to the theory that I used in my paper.
London, question, the real Don Quixote. I'm wondering about how Don Quixote becomes a real character over the course of the book, as distinct from all the suspicion cast on him as a historical character that you are forced to doubt, and the contrast between what it means for him to be real and fictional versus false and historical, or invented and historical. So if you have any thoughts on that, I loved that you ended with that phrase.
Yes. So it's actually funny you mentioned that because, I mean, Don Quixote is a fat book. So finding quotes in this was a nightmare. But I did find myself doing this kind of chronological progression as I was going through. And it wasn't until I started figuring out that like there's all of this unreliability happening in the narration that I encountered this last line and saw it say, real Don Quixote. And I just thought that it is very thought-evoking to include that at the last line. It did make me think about so many things, as I mentioned at the end, kind of like maybe it's something about how there was another real person who at the time after Cervantes published his part 1, someone, Avellaneda, published a fake part 2. So like real Don Quixote could very well be responding to that. I personally, as someone obsessed with fantasy and fiction and the like, love the idea of Don Quixote being like real. Obviously that's probably not the case, but that idea being pushed at the end, and overall tying it back to my argument, like making the reader think about like what it might mean. But yes, the word real was very valuable to me to encounter at the end of the book.
I had a comment following up on what London's saying, and then a question for Trey. But first off, like such great work that all three of you are doing. It's so wonderful to hear this. It seems like the starting off the sequel with Don Quixote and Sancho Panza learning that part 1 has been published within the world, the fictional world in which they exist, right? Is like amplifying the reality effect for these characters, right? It's like, oh, somehow the book we all read that was published in 1605, all the people they know have somehow read that, right? So it feels like that plays into your argument too. I'm just curious if that is important for your thinking. And then with Trey, I had a question about I love your reading about this. Both of you, like your projects speak to each other so directly. Obviously, thinking about this encouraging of the active reader and all that. But so with Kinboat, I've gone through so many permutations with this text, and I started off, finding him pretty repulsive. And maybe this is saying something kind of dark about myself, but I kind of identify more now with the way he reads. Like you talked about like a true reader versus Kinboat. I wondered if you're thinking of a true reader as someone who can somehow stop projecting their own meanings upon a text, because I feel pretty Kinboatian at this point. I feel like I'm always, whenever I'm reading Twelfth Night or Hamlet or Don Quixote, I feel like I'm always just eventually figuring out and reading myself into the text somehow.
Yes. So in response to the part about Don Quixote, the whole second part of my analysis does focus very closely on that and how things happening in the real world influence part 2 of Don Quixote. So the main things would be Avellaneda's part 2 making its way in Don Quixote, and Sancho not only discovering that fake part 2 and making fun of it multiple times throughout the text, but also how they encounter a character. Something else I bring up is This does happen in part 1 as well. Cervantes himself is mentioned a couple times in the text. At the beginning, there's a priest and a barber, and they're looking through Don Quixote's library, and they find another one of Cervantes' books, and they're like, yeah, I think this one's worth keeping. So Cervantes definitely does intentionally toy with like bringing reality and these kind of fourth wall breaks into the text. So yes.
I get your notion of feeling Kinbotian when you're like reading any text, and I think Kinbot is supposed to be like, for lack of a better word, like a caricature of that process. And him kind of like in the commentary of the poem, you kind of see that like he will reference a line, and the line will say something that seems completely clear, and he will just go on a long tangent about the history of this country that doesn't exist. And so he will try to like put you in these cycles of everything, and I also think this is just like Nabokov's actual like game that he's playing with the reader, and then you get to a point to where you're just like, oh, Kinbote doesn't get the story, and then it kind of leads up to one of my favorite moments to where Pale Fire, the poem, should have 1,000 lines, and it's missing the last line, and Kinbote at the end puts a note for the thousandth line, and he quotes the first line to make it a cycle, to almost represent the kind of cycle that we've been going through all along, just fighting against different interpretation. What does the author mean? What does Kinbote mean? What do I think it means? So I do think that like this kind of process of like feeling like I have a reading of it, but you're kind of projecting your own interpretation based on your experience is just what Kinbote is. Thanks.
Thank you all for these fantastic presentations related to your thesis. And okay, so I'm going to kind of work my way through this question because I'm a visual person. So, but I was thinking about how, in my mind, there's something about mystery and detective work involved in to me when I'm listening to you talk about these stories, the narrators and the action and the creative process. So I'm wondering if, in terms of your own research, first as a reader, just first reading the text, and then your own research, is there a process of kind of, this is why I'm trying to work my way through this question, because I'm trying to figure out how to say it without giving an answer or what my opinion. Like, at what level do you think that the construction of these texts have to do with investigation, mystery, and how the process of the writer, because it sounds like a horrible question, I'm sorry. Like the process of the writer trying to like, can you figure out in retrospect how they might have created this? Because these sound so layered, that's what I'm trying to say, so complex and so layered. So in part of your analysis, is it a type of decoding in that sense of the process of making, or are you not interested in that? I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, I can speak on that first. Yeah, so I mean, like, the process of, like, reading Don Quixote the first time, like, I talk a lot about the narration, but the funny thing is, like, the narrators ultimately do not come up a whole lot in the full length of the book. Most of it is Don Quixote's exploits. So going back and, like, revisiting the scenes with the narration and kind of thinking more about that, I was realizing that there was a lot more to it than I initially might have thought. And kind of tying it back to what I was saying earlier about the very end where it says real Don Quixote, that's when it kind of started to like click with me that it's like, okay, there are a lot of layers going on. But you're right, maybe on the first time reading through it, you wouldn't initially realize those things. So I don't know about you guys, but for me, going through the process of like investigating this text, it has been kind of like detective work, as you called it, and realizing all of these little things that are kind of like all clicking, and things I might not have noticed initially suddenly seeming like they're part of like a bigger message.
Yeah, kind of similar but different in my process of investigating my novel. So a quick spoiler alert is that the one who's been killing these guys is my narrator. And she does a really good job of disguising it and making you trust her so that it comes as a little bit of a shock when you find out at the end of the novel that it was her. But there's also a scene where, actually the scene that I did my big passage from, in addition, in that scene her friends kind of reveal to her that they have known she's been doing these things the whole time. Well, not the whole time, but for quite a long time at this point. And then she reveals to the reader that she she was almost carrying out these actions and killing these men subconsciously, as she claims that she immediately forgot what she had done after she did it, so she had no memory of being the one who killed them. And upon my reread of the text, when I was looking through to find the foreshadowing that I had missed, I realized that she has a lot of physical tells, and there are a lot of moments in the novel that she seems to be, or whoever is signaling to you as the reader that something is amiss here. There's actually a moment right at the very beginning when the first person dies, which was actually an accident. But when he dies, she finds a picture in his house that sets off everything. And as she finds the picture, there's a moment in the text that says, the dead man's finger acted as a finger that says, look here, something is about to change. Something important is happening right now. And of course the narrator has no idea what's happening, but you as the reader realize that the novel is almost showing you the narrator and showing you things about her that she doesn't know, even though it's being told from her perspective. So there is a level of detective work of unpacking what she's saying and realizing that there's a lot more to what's happening than just what she's presented to you.
I think one of the things that I stumbled across when I was like looking into the research for my book is an interview with Nabokov, and they specifically asked like some kind of like question about the puzzle to get him to talk about it, and his response was, "Oh, I just thought it was funny," and so he like there is obviously intention and to where like he wants the reader to kind of like pull up the cork board and like put everything together, but he very much like puts little hints out for the reader, and it's only up to the reader to kind of figure out like, should I take the story for what it is, or like how should I interpret it? And I think he just does a really good job in getting those pieces together. I don't go into it too much into my full paper, but I do touch on it because like without the reader kind of like catching it implicitly, then there's no active reader agency.
Can I ask y'all one more question? I wonder if I could invite each of you to historicize a little bit. Like, the question came to me as I was thinking, Trey, about your piece in London's, and like, originally, what are the stakes of having an unconventional or unreliable narrator in the 17th century versus in the middle of the 20th century? Like, what's the historical context that changes what it means to have, right, like, or what questions are at stake in those different moments? But I was thinking that too around yours, Charlie, because the detective story is such a dominant like genre right now, and detective stories are sort of concerned so much with justice, and obviously ecological justice seems something that's at play there. So I was just wondering if maybe each of you could say a little bit about how you see the thing you're asking or the thing you're noticing in this text, how you see it sort of interacting with the time in which it was written, or commenting on it, or somehow kind of speaking to that moment.
Yeah, I can start. With like more like novels that are within like from current time period, kind of into the 20th century still, it's kind of been really relative of just like the narrator is the one who's experiencing the story. There's not really a way that you can really doubt that this is happening to them, and even if it's like a first person narrator, we generally trust that like even though we understand that they're biased in their perspective, it is their perspective of it, and in this way, well, one can Nabokov changes like how you're gonna experience this narrative, like in the way it's like laid out. Like you literally turn the page and it says forward, and it looks like a forward, and you're getting like, oh, history of this author. It's like, oh wait, this author like, but you look back and forth, and you look at the poem, and it's like an actual poem, and then you go back to the like the commentary, and you've read this poem already. If you're like going chronologically, if you read the poem or like the line that it's referencing, it's just like that is not what it says at all. And so it gets to a point to where you realize that this book at its core is not something that you would like see in like generally in the same, like if it's in a fiction section, you'll be like, wait, this is an analysis of a poem, why is it in a fiction section? And then if it's like literature, you look into it more, it's like not even close to how you would think other books of that genre would be.
I can go next. Yeah, so thinking about like historically with Don Quixote, I'm so glad you asked that question, because there's actually a lot of debate about Don Quixote and whether or not it is considered the first novel. And so thinking about it like in a historical sense, whether or not it is the first novel, it is still certainly a trendsetter, because it does all of these meta things, whereas literature before it, I mean, obviously I haven't read all the literature of the time, so I'm generalizing here, but literature before it was more focused on telling a story and specifically also including some form of moral instruction in it. So the point of literature and any sort of writing before Don Quixote might have been to like tell you something specific and have some sort of takeaway out of it. So thinking about that and all of the unreliability and contradictions in Don Quixote makes it really interesting. And that's kind of how I connect it back to Walter Benjamin, is he has this idea of aura, wherein like a piece, a work, he talks about it in terms of art, I apply it to literature. And like an artwork, especially if it's like an infamous artwork, has some sort of aura around it that makes someone looking at it or interacting with it not want to critically analyze it. Like if you look at the Mona Lisa, you're gonna think, oh, it's a masterful work because that's all I've ever heard. And so you're not gonna look at the Mona Lisa and be like, that brushstroke could have been a little bit better, or these things could have been better. You're just gonna look at it and you're gonna think, oh, it's a masterwork, I guess I'm just gonna believe it's a masterwork. And Benjamin talks about how that's kind of a bad thing, and we need to step away from that and learn to, regardless of what might be surrounding the idea of a work, you need to insert yourself and think critically about it. And I feel like I see a lot of that in Cervantes with Don Quixote, is he's resisting that idea of a book just saying, hey, here's this story and here's what you should be taking out of it and applying to your own life. Instead, he intentionally makes it really confusing, and he adds all these layers to make you think, hang on, what's happening here? What should I be taking out of this? And you can certainly take a handful of messages out of Don Quixote, but the point is he wants to send you on that process of actively deciding what it means to you. So yes, the historical context overall is very important as well.
To bring up the rear. Something that has been very important to me the entire time I've worked on the paper, and at one point was almost heartbreaking, is that this book was originally written in Polish, and I unfortunately don't speak Polish. And so all I have to work with is the translation, and that has plagued me, because I have no way of knowing what it actually, like, natively understanding it in its original form. So it's a little bit hard to historicize it because I also did not experience day-to-day life in 2009 Poland. But I think something very interesting about trying to historicize this novel is when you think about it in its actuality, it is an older woman being kind of combated by a new age of technology and also attitude. So it's very much like and it was published in 2009, so it is very much something that exists on the cusp of something, the same way you're on the cusp of a new decade in 2009. So I think that's kind of just what I always kept in mind most importantly when I was thinking about historicizing, is I always had to remove myself from 2017 English and think, okay, but this is not just English.